All right, provoked. Provoked. God uses provocation to get us to see our flaws and our errors and to get us to cry out to him to help us to adjust so that we might refocus and get rid of the distractions and excuses to be back about our Father's business. In Romans, the 11th chapter, verse 11, Paul's writing there speaking about Israel and how they had missed their hour of visitation, that they rejected the Messiah. He came to his own and they received him not. Paul says there in Romans 11:11 how that because of that, salvation then had come to the Gentiles, and how the Most High is using the Gentiles to provoke Israel to jealousy. And so whenever we start talking about provoke, it is stirring one to action. Okay, to provoke one is to stir one to action, whatever that course of action may be. And so throughout the scriptures, we see 40 plus verses where Israel provoked the Most High. You know, they complained in the wilderness and in the day of provocation, the Bible says in Hebrews, and they stirred him up to cause many of them to die, 20 years and under, to cause them to die, their carcasses to lie dead, because they were complaining and murmuring, going round and round in the wilderness. And so we see how that he is always provoked by his people, but he provokes us to get us stirred in the right direction. And so what happens is oftentimes we don't realize how distracted and far away from him we have become, because our lives become grueling and just creatures of habit. So one day turns into a week, a month, a year, and we haven't prayed, we haven't fasted, we've forgotten the things that he told us years ago, which he hasn't forgotten, and that we need to be faithful, and that we have a God to glorify, charge to keep. And so many of us, you know, the word has been choked out of our lives through distraction and just the the rigors of life. And so consequently what happens is, you know, for instance, if you haven't been dutiful toward your spouse, your wife, then all of a sudden he may stir up someone. I mean, it could be lust, it could be the enemy, all of that, but oftentimes the Most High will stir up someone to show interest in your wife or your husband. And now all of a sudden we want to be involved and, you know, go about our spousal duties, but the motive is off. It's not even to be dutiful or out of love necessarily for that spouse. It's actually to show this other person who we become jealous of, that's my wife, my husband, my children. You see it with small children all the time, that you have children that over to the house as guests, and there's certain toys that have just been lying there with dust on them all along. And, you know, your child who lives there, whose toys, you know, it is, they ain't been thinking about them toys. Then all of a sudden, a visiting child comes over and shows interest in the toy, and now your child wants to snatch the toy and fight and show interest in the toy. And so that provocation is to promote us, to push us, to encourage us to get back to doing what it is that we're supposed to be doing. And so he provokes us to faith. He provokes us to pray, to incline our ear to hear, to fast, to reach out to him, reach up to him, to ask for that dedication to be restored. And so when you're in ministry and you're not doing what you're supposed to do, oftentimes someone else will come up and without even knowing, they'll just be doing what they're assigned to do, and you'll get jealousy. But the Lord, he will channel that jealousy that you have, especially when his hand is on your life. All things work together for the good. So what he'll do is he'll take that jealousy, if you're broken and you're sensitive to him and you really love him and called by him, instead of that jealousy, which is as cruel as the grave, according to the Bible, he'll turn that jealousy and use it as motivation to get you to doing what you're supposed to be doing. But you have to check your motive to make sure you're not doing it to spite the person who he's using to provoke you. Okay, because in actuality, when you look at it, they're actually being a blessing to you in the spirit realm, but carnally. So if you look at it carnally, then you'll see them as competition. And, the Bible says in Corinthians 10, comparing ourselves amongst ourselves, in doing so, we're not wise. So we're not in competition with one another in the kingdom. The exercising lordship is what over one another is what the Gentiles do. In Galatians 5, Paul says, don't bite and devour one another, lest you be consumed one to another. We also know Jesus taught a house divided against itself can't stand. So the enemy knows that one could chase 1,000, two could put 2,000 to flight. He understands the power of agreement. So he doesn't want us, touching and agreeing on the earth, because whatever one thing we ask, we'll receive it of the Father. So he doesn't want us coming into agreement. And so the Lord would use other nations oftentimes as a rod of correction for Israel when they would get off into adultery and idolatry and just blatant disregard for the commandments. All right. So just know that certain situations are used by the Most High by His mercy to get your attention, to provoke you back into a place of being broken before Him. And so think about Joseph when this thing was all done, the famine had passed, and his brothers had ended up meeting him in Egypt, and Joseph was able to feed his family during a time of famine. Well, they had sold him, but when he finally broke the silence and identified himself, incidentally, if Israelites didn't look like Egyptians, how could Joseph not be recognized by his own brothers, right? So there must have been a resemblance between Egyptians and Israelites. But nevertheless, Joseph, he got a revelation in the end of it when he should have been upset and angry at his brothers for selling him as a slave and putting him in position to be in prominence, to be able to be a blessing to his own family. He realized later, he said, y'all did it to me for evil, but God did it to me for good, that this day many would be saved. So know this, that whoever He's using to agitate you and aggravate you is for your good. And so just pray, though, that your eyes stay open, your ears stay open, you stay sensitive, so that you don't have to keep being prodded and provoked by the Most High into doing what it is that you call Him to do. Remember, He will not say in judgment, Matthew 25, and we can even see it in Matthew chapter 7, but where He says, He won't say, well said, well thought, well intended, thy good and faithful servant. It will be well done. He will say, well done, thy good and faithful servant. So it's only what we do for Christ that's going to last. The enemy wants to stop you from doing for Christ, get you focused on self so that you only do for self. So you can't follow Christ except you deny yourself, take up your cross, right, and follow Him daily, right? Self-denial. It's not self-denial. You don't want self-denial. You want to deny yourself, and there's a difference. You want to acknowledge your sin, your transgression. Create in me a clean heart, renew within me a right spirit, O God. But at the same time, now you want to deny yourself of ungodly pleasures and live holy in this present life, okay? So we love you. Just know that God is provoking you, not to wrath, not to anger, but provoking you to holiness and provoking you to a committed life before Him. People that He's using on the job, people that's lying and criticizing and talking about you, etc. The old church used to teach us, the more lie on me as much as you please, the more you talk, the more you lie. In other words, the more I'll bend my knees. So Satan has been given to us as a gift, the messenger of Satan, to buffet us. He's a thorn in our flesh. And it calls Paul in Corinthians chapter 12 to say, because of this thorn in the flesh, he sought the Lord 3 times that he might move it. But the Lord spoke and said, my grace is sufficient for thee. My strength is made perfect in your weakness. So He uses provocation to break us, to humble us, so that He might flow through us. I love you. Be encouraged, okay? As always.
He will speak to ancient doors on my behalf. Yes, He's creating open doors and open paths. And He will speak to ancient